Let's say amen again. Thank you for having me back. Dr. Hadley, thank you so much for this opportunity and for this celebration of the Advent season. Advent season, folks, remind us to sit with emotional ambivalence. No matter our comfort or discomfort, however our state of affairs, the invitation remains to enter the zone of emotional ambivalence. Early in its history, Christians discerned how the call to Advent held a potential for shaping us. Early on, Christians counted the 4 Sundays before Christmas as a time to support catechumens in preparation for baptism. The whole community shared in the emotional tension that built within each candidate for baptism. The whole community sat in waiting like the baptismal candidates during the season. Advent invites us to sit collectively with emotional ambivalence. It is a time of both sorrowful lamentation and hopeful anticipation. During Advent, we ready ourselves to celebrate the birthday of a child. This child's crib conditions portend ominous signs of the coffin conditions that would follow his death by crucifixion. On the one hand, this season celebrates a ruler who conquered the kingdoms of this world. On the other hand, this season mourns that we still wait for the consummation of that kingdom. The actual world we live in still masquerades as undefeated by this child king. Advent triggers Christians to the complexities of real-world existence. No reducing our expectations to the actual past. In a world that seems hopeless, it keeps us hopeful for a better future. No escaping the hard questions of the present. In a world drunk on fantasy, it steadies us with a sober reality. In this space, our exercise becomes attentive sitting between the push and pull, the ebb and flow, the tears of sorrow and the tears of joy. In this space, we live with all the ambiguous rhythms of fast, feast, and feed. Only now we do so with special, focused attention. But then there's Taylor Swift. I know so little about her, so what I'm about to say what I'm about to say speaks to who we are and not who she is as a person. Advent waiting puts into perspective the odd behaviors of our condition of comfort. Taylor Swift becomes the symbol of a culture that feels survivor's guilt. Yes, we mourn the horrors people face beyond the zones of our comfort. We really do mourn for a moment. Then we suppress deep into our unconscious feelings our relief. We feel relieved that we are not enduring the atrocities. The 1,200 Israeli men, women, and children killed in the October 7 heinous Hamas-led attack, we feel sad for them. But we're also glad it wasn't us. The estimated 1,300 to 2,000 civilians killed last month in West Darfur. Sad for them, but glad it's not us. The 450,000 Sudanese refugees in the neighboring nation of Chad. Today, we're sad for them, but glad it's not us. the 3,428 educational facilities damaged by Russian war garbage. Sad for the Ukrainian children's, to put it mildly, disrupted schooling, but glad it's not us. Or the more than 11,000 Palestinians, 4,300 of whom were children, killed in Gaza by the Israeli military war trash, or the over 1 million displaced Gazans from their homes. Sorry for them, but glad it's not our children, not our homes, not our displacement. We can speak on atrocities in Syria, Venezuela, Burkina Faso, the list goes on. And repeating words like extrajudicial killing, shelling, explosive weapons, sexual violence, torture, looting, words intended to heighten our emotional state only serve to lessen the emotional impact. Our emotional bandwidth stretches only so far. We have only so much psychological space to sit with the overwhelming sense of survivor's guilt. We prescribe ourselves the cheap remedy of tuning out or turning toward a Taylor Swift escapism. Let's talk about something that's enjoyable, we say. When the world seems out of control, we want to shrink it to that which is in our control. And then the season of Advent comes around. And we, hearing the call to this special attentiveness, watch the world open with disturbing lessons. Lessons about our vulnerability. It invites us to make space for a collective consciousness, to sit and recognize we're limited. We're dependent. This morning's reading from the Psalm embodies the tension that the season of Advent holds. It's one part thanksgiving and the other part lamenting. In fact, the entire psalmody exhausts this tension. The first time I read Psalm 126, although I cannot recall the memory, I still would bet my house that I read it as quickly as possible. I bet I just wanted to finish the book of Psalms. By the 126th chapter, many of the Psalms begin to sound alike. One student noted that the further one reads the Psalms, the less one has to say about them. Our readings get longer and longer, and our comments get shorter and shorter. We know the issues these lyricists write about. They repeat them over and over again. In one sense, Psalm 126 rings a note of thanksgiving. Listen to these words. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. Then our mouths filled with laughter and our tongue with shouts of joy. Yet in another sense, this same psalm also drones like a communal complaint to God. Listen to these words. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like the water courses in the Negeb. May those who sow in tears reap in shouts of joy, carrying their sheaves. This psalm mirrors the experience of our lives so closely that it hardly seems like poetic artifice. The setting for this psalm we know not, yet it speaks to our reality. We don't know if the author composed it before the exile to Babylon or after the return from Persia, but it speaks to our reality. We don't know if the community sung it in the autumn or in the springtime, but it speaks to our time today. We don't know when in the cycle of ancient Israel's many destructions and rebuilding, this lyricist felt inspired to craft the tune and write the triplets, but it speaks to our reality today. Sung by a community in exile in Babylon? Maybe. Or sung by a community left in Jerusalem, not even worthy enough to be taken into exile? Possibly. But our community this morning chants its words because it speaks to our reality. We too live in the cycle of good times and bad times. Bad for us tomorrow, good for us today. Bad for them today, good for them tomorrow. This very real world ebb and flow that we suffer lays exposed right here in a brief hymn in the scriptures. The good news. This psalmist, while describing our world, while laying bare our condition of cyclical hope and despair, and hope again and despair again, point us beyond this world. This is a psalm of ascent. To perform a song of ascent transfers the musician literally to a higher plane. The lyrics join the melody when either pilgrims journey moving toward the festal city of Jerusalem have to ascend Mount Zion, or the lyrics join the melody as liturgical leaders move up the steps in a ceremonial procession of worship. And as go the physical topography performed with the singing of this song, so too this psalm meant to move the community from the lower place of their existence to a higher place of human flourishing. This hymn writer knows of another reality. Here, my friends, present distress is no argument for the denial of God's power and grace. The cycle of good times and bad times described in this song breaks, and the ebb and flow disrupts when the words of verses 2 and 3 begin. Then it was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we rejoiced. Here we see the fruit of waiting. Here we witness the conditions that make dreams possible. Here we are forced into joy, choked by laughter, stunned by wonder, coddled by grace. We learn to be okay with the fact that not everything is in our control. And yet, God remains. Paul Brassey notes that when the verse describes the recipients of God's acts, it uses the passive verb. In other words, their laughter is involuntary. Their dreams come regardless of their will. Shouts spontaneously utter from their belly. Sweeping grace takes over our very bodies when we learn to sit and wait and trust in God. Sweeping grace restores our fortunes like the watercourses in the dry region of the Judean Negev. Sweeping grace requires that we only sit still in our helpless, vulnerable, dependent state and wait on God. Some folk assuage their feelings of survivor's guilt with Taylor Swift escapism. Others do so with internet activism. Neither help. If you're like me, you want to get something done. You want to help the citizens of Gaza, Darfur, Kiev. When you hear how in its fight against Hamas, the Israeli Defense Force has extended a campaign in ways that crush the civilians in Gaza, you shout at your television screen, "Stop it!" But you know this does no good. If you're like me, you read Psalm 126, verse 4, and recognize that Israel can restore the fortunes of Gaza, like the water courses in the Negev, if they would just stop cutting off water to the Gaza region. When you read how it is estimated 96% of the water left is polluted and not fit for drinking, you want to get on social media and launch a verbal assault. But let me tell you, those attacks don't do much to stop bombs. And you think as you do something in social media, you're doing something that really is meaningful. Well, it does something. It hardens partisan attitudes. Water. Everyone needs water. We need it from below. We need it from above, and this is a time to sing the song of ascent. This is a time to walk up, to move to a higher plane of human flourishing. This season and this psalm together they call us to Christian discipline. This season and this psalm both remind us that there are many things outside of our control. They both remind us that even in our dependent limits, hope still awaits us. They both remind us that the ordinary trials and sorrows of life are enough by themselves for God to hear, to see, and to act on behalf of all creation. Not a tribal God, but a God of love for all. This season and this psalm both remind us that, like the ancient sower wailed as they spread seed onto the ground, knowing their labor was dependent on conditions beyond their control, our tears acknowledge our dependence on God. This lyricist believes that the tears of the present time are watering the seed of a future harvest of gladness. This psalm and this season bears the promise of more good news, more than we know how to handle. Happy Advent. Let's journey toward Christmas.